Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining today. I'm really excited to have you and really excited to introduce our new guest. But before we do, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to those of you that are listening, follow, like, share any of our content. But also to our sponsors, Integrated Compliance Solutions, their complete seed-to-bank solution, Greenlight Payments, and Amplio, an outsourced CFO services. We couldn't be doing this without them. I can't be doing it without you guys. So please, if you do like what you hear today and want to see more, join us on our YouTube channel, Patreon, social media, Global Hemp Association, and globalhempassociation.org. Anyways, thank you very much, and on to our guest.
I'd love to hear how you got started.
For sure.
It seems that you came out of nowhere and you've got this massive following. It's so impressive.
Well, thank you. So for the last 5 years, I've done this type of networking events and groups with efforts to build relationships, with revenue-minded relationships. And it's where my top 5 personality traits are connector, arranger, woo factor, communications. And so I very naturally enjoy doing stuff like this. And then when I found the cannabis industry or the hemp industry, it was just mind-blowing to me that there was nothing like this for people to connect and to build relationships and find a place to find resources that was, and more so a voice for the fiber, grain and fiber space. There was a lot of conversation around the CBD and cannabinoid side. So I just took the bull by the horns and asked Bob. Our meetings haven't always been like this. I mean, it's been a lot of learning for me. Bob's been at everyone for the most part, or at least alongside, but yeah. So.
Well, I think it's wonderful. And I love that you're focusing on fiber and grain. What we're really trying to do is get this commodity mainstream commodities, We need to, I love the passion in the industry, but we need to get over the love of the plant, because if we don't start focusing on the economics, we're not going to get anywhere.
Yep. The business side of it. Yes, exactly. So that's kind of where we took it from a very different, right? As much as we just approached this from a very different angle. I went after businesses. I went after, trying to bridge the gap and bring the communication, stir up the questions and get the conversation started from both sides of this, from investors, from, big manufacturers that weren't necessarily in the industry, but that are going to be utilizing hemp in their products or in their manufacturing or production and so forth. So yeah, for everybody that's joining, thank you very much. Welcome. I was just kind of giving my story about how I started this and where my passion, I guess, comes from. And it really is about making connections. And Julie, I think I've said this before, but I host 8 to 12 of these a month focused on all different subjects. So I've seen quite a few of you before, but for those of you that don't know, we've got a textiles group, biofuels, construction and building materials, grain and fiber, carbon, and then a monthly networking group that we do. And then this is the education series that we host every week on Thursday. And we just break down all different types of subjects or all different topics. I open them up for you guys to ask questions. If you do have any questions specifically, feel free to put them in the chat. There were some questions that came in, but I'll be honest, this is such a foreign topic, Julie, that I'll really lean on you to kind of guide as to, it best, right? As far as what you've seen and what opportunities are there. But if you guys do have questions, don't hesitate to put a comment in the chat, or down at the bottom of the page, there's an opportunity. There's a button called reactions where you can raise your hand or put your hand up, and then I can call on you. If you do, or we do open the mic, please just keep it to a short question, not long explanation. It's not necessarily a discussion, but an opportunity to start conversation or ask questions. Other than that, Julie, I'll let you or turn it over to you. I guess we could wait maybe 1 or 2 more minutes before we get started, but I'll turn it over to you for an intro, kind of take it from here. You're welcome to kind of tell us a little bit about how you got started, what Panxchange does, where you're headed, or how you got into the industry specifically. And then, I can kind of just guide questions and go from there. Deal?
Sure, absolutely. So Panxchange is a market structure solution for physical commodities. We offer online trading, benchmark pricing, fundamental analysis, and specialized consulting. We are a team of physical commodity specialists. I come from Cargill predominantly. I've worked at Fibro, if anyone's old enough to remember who they are. Semper Energy Trading, again, focused on physical deal flow. And our team comes from RBS Energy and from Stone, formerly Stone, FC Stone, JBS, et cetera. Like, we really, really know the physical market. If you want to stay in the know on the market and the fundamentals, I highly recommend you subscribe to our monthly newsletter. So let me give you 3 examples of what's going to come up in this report, because it also kills 2 birds with 1 stone and gives you a market update at the same time. One thing we'll be talking about is how exports in D8 continue to hold prices steady, which are up from the beginning of the year. However, since last month, prices for D8 have fallen approximately $500 a kilo. So that tells us either the demand is stabilizing, but which may be part of it, but really what's likely happening is those holding D8 inventory are starting to dump it as they're getting nervous that this will be banned or highly regulated. So that's one point. Another one we're talking about is the massive inventory, of course, since 2019. At this stage, if your biomass is not in pristine condition, meaning no stems, no seeds, meaning that it needs to be properly dried and stable, if none of that is true, scrap it. It is not worth the cost of processing. And similarly, as we talked about as early as December of 2020, the inventory build of 2019 was, we saw the hit in biomass prices. And as we predicted, everything is getting semi-extracted to preserve the CBD, but it's getting stuffed in every corner. So as we're seeing this month, the crude oil processors, we're seeing now that they're altering their product strategy. They are cutting back dramatically, and they're scaling back, moving away from the wholesale market and going into finished goods. So that's the type of stuff that we cover, along with, of course, our suite of prices across not only the cannabinoid spectrum, but fiber and grain as well. I have been reading over a bunch of the questions on carbon. I'm not here to talk about the amazing potential for this plant. I'm preaching to the choir, right? We don't need to talk about that anymore. I'm here to talk about the how and the why it's so important to get started today. Mandi, you want me to just go through a little overview before we do the Q&A?
Yeah, perfect. Because then I can just kind of fill in, and then questions as they do come up. Derek, I'll give you an opportunity to chat here in just a second, but go ahead and Julie, and then I'll call on people and we can feed them in.
Sure. Okay. So, I did see some of the questions that were submitted early on, and I participated when one of the sessions with Bruce. Mm-hmm. I think there's a huge misunderstanding about carbon credits. Just because you grow hemp doesn't mean it's like a COVID vaccine where you get to drive up and pick up your certificate for carbon credits and sell them the same afternoon. Unfortunately, it's the opposite of that. They are earned. And it is a enormous undertaking, but it needs to start now. It's expensive, it's difficult, and it's time intensive. I want to talk about why it's important to get started now. Yeah. You'll hear the word additionality a lot with carbon, and it's, to me, in the beginning, it was a little bit misleading because it's talking about the additional reductions of greenhouse gases. So it is a little almost an oxymoron there. But it's really important when the environmental engineer shows up to begin the assessment for your credits, you don't tell him that you grew hemp to get rich. What you want to talk about is why you're growing hemp vis-a-vis what you were doing before, because it's sequestering all of this carbon and it's good for the environment. Super important point. Carbon credits in a voluntary market are looking for this additionality, not just because if you're growing hemp for the past 10 years, you may not be eligible for a credit. You have to show a change. that is conscientiously sequestering or reducing or avoiding carbon. That was the first point I want to make. Credits are given when you show the reduction compared to prior practices. Just mentioned that. Simplest example is going from a tilling process to a no-tilling process. Tilling, digging up the soil, the carbon comes out. Forgive me if you already know this. I know it's a wide-ranging audience here.
Yeah, I think it's great. So you're doing great.
So you can, the interesting thing with hemp is, yes, you can sequester a significant amount of hemp in the soil, but like a tree, the plant itself is sequestering hemp. So, and one third point on that too, if a farmer earns credits and sells them to a processor, and that processor uses them for bioplastics, that's a separate credit because they're displacing fossil fuels. It is not double counting, which is a good thing for us. Why would you want to participate in this market if I'm telling you how expensive and difficult it is? 2 reasons. You want to be compensated for your practices. Credits today are worth $2 to $10 per ton of carbon sequestered. I guarantee you they will quadruple in the next 2 to 4 years. It will become essential in farm economics. Like you won't be, meaning your sale price at the farm gate will not be competitive unless you're factoring in the revenue you're getting for these credits. Huge, huge thing that you need to start getting ready for. Think of it this way. Tesla first quarter 2021 profits were $438 million. They sold $518 million worth of carbon credits in that period. They are profitable because they sold carbon credits. That's where ag is going. So that's why we got to get on it fast. The second reason that you want to start now, and personal opinion, but especially with this administration, many people believe that a voluntary market, as messy and as imperfect as it is the required stepping stone to a regulated market. That's where you really reduce greenhouse gases, also known as a cap and trade market. So again, if that happens, prices of these credits go up, demand will far outstrip supply in the next 5 years. And so again, because this takes well over a year to get start to finish, you want to start now. So let me run through the bullet points of how it works. First things first, you'll likely need to partner up with other firms due to the cost of this. It is, I think last time I said it's no less than $50K in our research. That's just for registration. It's no less than $100K. So you're going to need to partner up on this with other farms. Fortunately, we've also confirmed 2 things. You can do this in numerous types of crops, say like alfalfa or pea proteins and hemp, and you can do it across multiple regions like Colorado and Kentucky. But what you need to do is find people with like-minded practices so that you're going to come up with similar results. You want to collect all of your data. Again, what is the additionality you're providing? What data do you have to back this up? Then you want to find the registry that works best for you. So Vera is the biggest one, but there are also some like Gold Standard and CAR. Some work faster than others. Some may be more or less expensive than others. Think also that the value of that registry may be different down the road too. I think there will be grades. Think of it like bonds. The quality of this carbon credit. Think of it like a bond, I think would be useful. And the reason why you need to go to that registry first is you need to see which environmental engineers they are acceptable to them to actually do the audit of your sequestration. And you want to shop around for that as well. I have to tell you guys now, we actually couldn't even get a call with one of them. They said they're just not taking any new business. That's really significant. The demand is soaring in agriculture. So you want to shop around, find the best one that works for you and your project. Consider a project assessment by that same firm, I think is best. But there are other programs as well, like Comet, where you can go get a third-party assessment before you invest the same amount of money to go do this. Okay, so two more things. All going well, the engineers conclude your additionality. Let's say it's 5 or 6 or even more tons of carbon sequestered than your previous practices. Then one more step needs to be verified by an independent third party. Just to make sure there's no shenanigans going on. It's another environmental firm that will say, yes, indeed, I agree with all of this data. These credits should be issued. Then you can sell your credits. And by then, all going well, you will sell them on Panxchange. But we got plenty of time for that to happen now. Like I said, I think it's interesting. If any of you have researched this, there's a firm called Indigo, quite telling that it's less than 1% of the U.S. cropland. It's only like corn and soy. And none of them have been approved yet. They're all in the works, which also tells you that companies are forward buying on the assumption that the credits will happen. That is a massive sign of demand for these things. So it is early days, but it is absolutely the right time to do this. One more quick point. We always tend to talk about the growers. Going to the fiber processors and the herd processors and whatnot, you may have another step. It could work in your favor. There may not be a methodology that is already published and approved that works for you. You may need to create your own. The market is receptive to that. Again, we all want, do what we can to reduce emissions. So there's an openness to that. It's just not easy to create your own. You have to find the methodology that's as close as possible to yours. Then you create your own. Okay, this has to change and this has to change.
Mm-hmm. Do you know?
Yeah, that's the spiel in the beginning.
Okay, so I've got a question. We talked a lot about on like the farm and ag side, but what about on the product side? Have you seen exchange, say, for the hempcrete or, the exchange of the carbon credit for the actual sequestration once it's in an end-use product?
Not yet, but it's absolutely going to happen. It should happen. And as I had just said, there's an openness for it to happen. My concern, and, my colleague Alex is here. I mean, how many methodologies do you think are on that register?
Oh, at least hundreds.
There's hundreds of methodologies. This has been going on in Europe for decades.
Yeah.
Hundreds of methodologies you're going to need to sort through and find one that, for example, the closest one would be replacing fossil fuels and bioplastics using this flax, right? But is that good enough for hemp, or do we have to create our own? I mean, that's the process you need to go through.
Right. Okay, Derek, do you want to ask your question real quick before we go on to other questions?
Yeah, first off, thank you, Mandi, for putting this on, and everybody in your team that's done this work. And Julie, Thank you for your time and coming on. And really, you did answer a lot of my questions. But one of my questions is, we're a producer up in Canada, and we produce over 10,000 tons of product, and we farm on over 5,000 acres. And we're looking at how globally, are these credits applied in both Canada and U.S. as a company, because we are expanding operations in the United States, and we have products. I mean, I think we have 12 different products that we bring to market right now. So. Anywhere from cat litter to animal bedding, soil enricher. So and we work with plastics manufacturers that are buying our fibers, et cetera. So we have not started this process yet, but we've been manufacturing for going on 2 years now. And right here, I think we're in a spot that we should really be having a conversation with an environmental assessor, I believe.
Sounds like it. Sounds like you're ready to get there. And at 10,000 acres,
5,000 acres, about 10,000 tons annual for our product and production line right now, currently. Mm-hmm. And we're expanding.
Yeah. So so the first question is, do you want to amortize that cost with a partner? There's risks involved, right? Or do you want to go it alone? Maybe you can even get financing for it. But it sounds like you may be right on that cusp of being able to do it on your own.
Yeah. I don't feel that we have an issue with. What'd you say? It's about 100,000 in the registration. Is that what it is?
Well, it keeps going up every time
Okay. Well,
as of now, it's 100,000 is my estimate. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
And
Fantastic.
I do want to tell everyone, we are working on a couple of very exciting projects. So we're digging here too. It's everyone in this industry is on a learning curve, and it's not a static situation. It's very fluid.
Sure. What?
And then the second part of my question is, we're talking about basically the fiber side, but is it also applicable on the seed side, seed oil, protein, et cetera?
Okay. So first question. I think especially in the early days, there will be no shortage of buyers for these credits, no matter where in the world they are.
Okay.
I do think over time, as supply gets more abundant, that there will be, again, like bonds, it will start to have that physical commodity aspect where regionally would change the price. So maybe, for example, an energy company in Colorado wants to only buy credits from Colorado, or a paper mill may only want forestry, something like that. But that's longer term. I don't think there'll be any problem selling them today. Right now, it's about just the companies being able to say they are offsetting their footprint.
Perfect. Okay.
With seeds, I'm not sure I understand the question, because how would seeds provide?
Well, that's my question. I don't know, and I hate to. No question is a dumb question. So,
you mean
with it being grown, is there a certain percentage that could be considered you're growing for that food product into the market? And so, I don't know, and I guess maybe an assessor would be able to answer that a little bit more clearly.
Okay, so I have been asked that question before, and I think if you're there is an opportunity here to get a premium for seeds that use less water and fertilizer, for example. But I don't think, my hunch is that it'd be really hard to be eligible for an actual credit.
Fantastic. Okay, and then so you can growing on 5,000 acres, you can get the credit for that, and then you can also have the credit for your products. So it's not double dipping?
Not double dipping.
Okay.
Not the slightest. Yeah, that was one of my first questions. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. One more question, Gary, and then I'm going to call on you real quick. But there was a question of what your thoughts are about carbon credits being changed on a Chicago commodity exchange alongside copper or iron. Isn't that
already? CME already has a futures contract in carbon. Right now, it is heavily focused on energy markets, but it will. There are a lot of entities launching futures contracts in carbon, and it will come down to when you're ready. You can go speculate on them today if you have a brokerage account, if you'd like. When you're ready to sell, though, by the time you all get credits, you will have many options of where to sell your credits.
Cool?
I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
If not, Sean, let us know. Let me know, and I can readdress it, or we can do something else.
Continental Exchange also has carbon credits. I don't recall what the contract name is there. But yes, there are already, those are futures contracts, though. Some are physically delivered, some are not. You need to the difference. You need to know the difference between a financial contract and a futures physically delivered contract too. So
cool, good to know. Okay, Gary.
I have a two-part question. Are these carbon credits backed by an asset? And then if that asset is destroyed, do you lose the credits?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is a policing or monitoring of the project to make sure, again, using our simplest tillage example, that the day after you receive the credit, you didn't start tilling it again, because then you release all the soil back in the air, right? So the question is there like a policing of this, or what's the specific question?
No, if once the credit is issued, is it based on your crop, your product? And if that crop or product gets destroyed, do you lose your credits?
Based on practice, isn't it? Based on your practice and you versus an actual product.
So a credit is issued on what they call a vintage basis, which means you earned the credit from last year.
Okay.
Based on it.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Artie? Thank you. Thanks, Julie.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be on this session. Many great friends on the session. A quick shout out to my friend Nathan Murphy with Hempliance, which Hempliance represents an app that is going to allow us to do true blockchain tracking of everything agriculture, from planting all the way through processing. Are we able to now effectively utilize blockchain technology as a simpler way of tracking and qualifying for carbon credits, because the blockchain will actually create the data that proves that certain practices were employed on a given field that comply with the provisions of what that carbon credit represents. So if we simply just could show the blockchain of data of how a particular crop was growing, then don't we automatically qualify for those credits? And a scoring system could be utilized that ties into that blockchain then that says, based on these practices, here is the amount of carbon credits you qualify for based on the practices that were used. If you're now talking about the fact that you're going to sell carbon credits after the crop is harvested, not at the time of planting, is that what I'm understanding?
Well, I first have a question for you. How are you putting farming practices on blockchain?
Well, farming,
that would be
I would like to answer that best.
So we have a system that tracks the growth cycle of hemp using a mobile app technology, and it allows us to collect data directly from the field. Artie, we haven't fully followed up on this, but thanks for the shout out. We are currently looking at implementing our own methodology, as you were talking about, for hemp-specific growth cycles to track the amount of carbon that's sequestered based on the size of the weight of the field and how much carbon is usually pulled out. And so we're working on different varieties and how, there's a lot of nuance to it depending on the variety, depending on the region. But that's one of those things. We take that information, timestamp, blockchain, or timestamp, location, pictures, and other information, certain data points, and we put those on the blockchain. So that's just a quick answer for that. But again, thanks for the shout out, Artie.
Yeah. So if I'm in the traditional agri world, I am known as the Grim Reaper of blockchain. You cannot, hang on, but let me finish. You cannot identity preserve a physical commodity. You just can't. It gets commingled. You can either accidentally or on purpose. Whatever you're putting on the blockchain can so easily be swapped out. And until that is solved, it's not worth it. And then there's a whole other thing with internationally how the buyers don't want blockchain. They like you shoving all the documents in a manila envelope because it gives them 12 more days to pay. So
I'd love to talk to you about it later.
Well, yes. I'll say this though. Carbon credits is the very first use case that I can see for the certificates. It makes sense. That's the first time I've ever said that. But again, just for the certificates. But the reality is, I think that this is such a big lift that let's just go get the process started, because really blockchain is about distribution. And what blockchain is good for is making sure these credits don't get abused and resold and resold and resold. Mm-hmm. So there is a get there.
Yes, absolutely.
Personal opinion, it's not a today get. It's a later get. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, question. I saw maybe a hand just went down or I lost him on the next question that I saw. Let's see. So is there anything else real quick? Anybody else have anything? I saw that there are a couple of questions that came up. Bob, I know you had one. Wondering, farmer gets his field tested now so that he gets record of the change. So I guess, should farmers be testing fields now so that they can show record of change, as later they progress? Is that what you're asking, Bob?
If you're improving your process from today, yeah, today is a great point, snapshot in time to show, again, that additionality. How are you sequestering more carbon? Because and talk about those practices. Any data you have on that is going to be helpful to your cause.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I see your hands back up. Is it Akona?
Yeah, it's Akona.
Akona, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And this is my a third webinar that I attended, so I guess I'm still a bit of a newbie, so to speak. But fortunately, when it comes to the whole carbon aspect, I've had a bit of a walk with it since 2008, 2009, when it just came out in Europe. And one of the big things that people don't get is that before you even start, you should have contacted your environmental assessor so that you can prove additionality as a prior thought. So the moment you finished your financial model and you haven't even gone and fetched your money yet, that is when you need to have called your environmental assessor so that additionality can be proved 100%. Also, what I've been informed is that if you're not generating at least or sequestrating at least 20,000 metric tons of CO2 per annum, you're going to be struggling to make any sort of financial ends meet just due to the cost of getting into the market. I'm based in South Africa, so I don't know what the cost differences are, but we can look at anything up to about 250,000 USD for us to put a project on to the get emission carbon receipts. Then we were the bottom 50 earning countries or poorest countries of the world, so we could get onto the compulsory market. Now we're no longer there, so we have to be in the voluntary market, and those two markets also function differently. I think, Jude, I think you can maybe elaborate on how those two markets function as well, because there is a difference between those two markets. But the key thing is that if you don't prove additionality, that's your biggest pitfall. And the other problem with regards to looking at blockchain is that all the sensors would need to be calibrated the same. And since you're going to be using different sensors to measure X, Y, and Z to make sure that the measurement and verification is the same, it's going to be very difficult for a standard to be established at this stage, especially with the guys not conforming to any particular standard in terms of how those sensors are done. So using it as a method to qualify, I don't think any time soon, until a standard like Wi-Fi is written out and everybody has to conform to that particular standard. So I know it wasn't much of a question, it was more of a comment on the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's good information.
Okay, I want to take a real quick break and give a shout out to a couple of our sponsors. Integrated Compliance Solution. They're a complete seed to bank solution for all of our hemp banking and cannabis needs. Also, Greenlight Payments, payment solution services for anybody that's in the industry looking for a reliable, compliant payment solution. And then Amplio. Amplio is an outsourced CFO service that is very well educated and knowledgeable about our industry. So another thing, we'll move on to the next or move on to our speaker again, but thank you so much and excited to have you guys. Robert, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mandi. Again, it's wonderful to be here, and it's a very interesting topic. I will actually just mention that because of my interest and because of Mandi's kind invitation to be on the panel, I made a point of reading up on carbon credits because although I've spoken about it and heard about it, I really didn't know that much specifically about it. So I'm pleased to tell everybody that there's a lot of information that you can find online that addresses, a lot of the wheres, hows, whys, different options. And in fact, one thing, Julie, forgive me, I don't know if I read this out of an article from Bloomberg Green dated October 28th, 2020, about a farmer in Iowa who sold credits, and they allowed him to go back 5 years in order to determine how many credits, in fact, because he was able to prove that he had adopted some more environmentally friendly practices back 5 years earlier. Julie, maybe you can comment on that. I thought that was very interesting. And outside of that, I think also that they say in the article that a lot of people band together, kind of do a co-op of sorts because of the cost, and that also people have to really give thought to whether or not they're going to participate now. It's kind of a catch-22 because, as Julie pointed out, the expectation is that prices will rise in the future. And generally, they don't look to go in for a 1-year agreement because they want to see that you're sustaining your practices. So the contracts generally are a minimum of 5 years up to 20 years. Now that's kind of on title. So you have a contractual obligation to do that during that period. And if you break that contract, there are considerable consequences. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, if you rent out the land, you have to ensure, it is your responsibility to ensure that your tenant is fulfilling those practices. So there are these
hurdles,
issues that should be recognized and understood. And, again, I point to the fact that there is a lot of information available, and I urge people to take a look. There is a lot of money. I mean, the bottom line, as Julie said, is there's a lot of money available here. And if you're a farmer, it only makes sense because what they're basically saying to you is, we're going to pay you to be more productive, more efficient, and more environmental.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. And for that research. I don't know if I've read the same article, but yes, you need to prove your carbon sequestration over time. And that for better or worse, there are, this is a hairy monster. I mean, there are projects that you can add on, for lack of a better term, bonus points. Co-benefits. Thanks, Alex. My colleague Alex Mleshko is here with me. Co-benefits, for example, that you can actually spruce up the value of your credits by proving a gender equality project that's in effect. Now, I don't know any more than that at this stage, and I doubt I will ever be an expert on those co-benefits. And it's very subjective, and I think it will change over time. A lot of this will change over time. Here's the thing. We build cash markets in Panxchange. And they're usually thin markets, and they're usually new markets. And usually I tell my team, when we're trying to build our customer base, don't bother with the sellers. You will trip over them. You will trip over them trying to find buyers. The buyers are always the hardest to get. in carbon credits, it is significant that you've got these Fortune 500 companies going out and hoovering up every single credit they can get their hands on. And, is it saving our climate? I don't know, but it's a step in the right direction, and they get to say that they're lowering their carbon footprint. That's why I am absolutely sure that these credits will quadruple in price in the near future, because the buy side is going to start catching on more and more, and the credits take a really long time to get. So they're anywhere from $2 to $10, depending on the location and the type of the crop. And that, a couple of transactions forward sold, because remember, some of these have not even passed muster yet in the US. So we've got a long way to go on that, but it's definitely going to be worth it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both. Ruth, go ahead, and then Bobby will come back to you as well.
Okay, thanks. And Mandi, thanks again for putting on these amazing sessions. I love the work you're doing. It's phenomenal.
Thank you.
So I have a very basic question about additionality. And that is, so if you were doing some kind of farming that was, not sequestering carbon or whatever, and you change over, fine, I understand that. Then you can document that. You can see that what you're doing is increasing sequestration of carbon, and that's obviously a good thing, and you're helping. So additionality, great. But you do that 1 year, and great, you get your credits, but you continue farming in the same wonderful manner for, for years after. Do you get additionality every year? Do you get carbon credits every year? I mean, you're still now in your second, third, fourth, 10th year, you're doing the same thing that you started in the first year where you made the change. So how does that affect the carbon credit thing and the additionality?
Yeah. So it depends on the measurement window of what you're applying for. I mean, to emphasize the point, if you've been growing hemp the same way for the last 10 years, you don't qualify. No matter how great it is for the planet, you've been doing it. It's what has changed that makes voluntary markets significant. So you don't get paid to do what you do. People don't get paid. What's frustrating and possibly what's frustrating today is like people are getting forestry credits for not cutting down trees. Well, it's probably illegal to cut trees in certain places, so they should not be getting credits. That's a sample of where the system is imperfect.
So again, if you make the change, you get your credits, then in the fourth year, are you getting more credits? Because now you haven't made a change from your third year.
You should be able to. Yeah. It depends on the term of the credit that you get and you sell, and then you're eligible to do it again. As far as I understand.
What I hear is it's a matter of catching it, like that advice we keep getting that we have to measure now so we can prove improvement in the practices in order to get the credit. And then once that credit is established, then it can carry on through the lifetime of that credit, I guess, or of that contract. That's what you're saying?
Sorry, repeat that, the lifetime?
The credit, as long as you maintain those good practices, once you've established it, then that credit has value, but it's establishing it from the beginning that is so critical for our farmers.
Absolutely. And the other interesting thing, Ruth, that I think that we should let's call it like it is. Whatever we talk about today is highly likely to evolve 5 years from today. I do think that based on demand, it will evolve in a very user-friendly way. But we can only talk about what we know of today and what works today.
Okay, thank you for that. I have another question, if I may, Mandi. And that is, so if you are growing fiber and you're hemp fiber and you're getting your carbon credits, and then you use that fiber in any, in hempcrete, in bioplastic, in any of the many uses, do you, as the farmer, get those credits for the usage of those, or does the manufacturer of the bioplastic or the hempcrete or whatever, who gets those credits?
If you sold the hemp to the manufacturer gets the credits.
Okay.
Not certain on that one. The contracts for soil carbon are based with the producer and or the landowner. These other issues downstream are other additionality issues. The manufacturer is the one who has to come up with the net zero condition on the materials, right?
It goes with the supply, my understanding.
He would prefer to buy net zero to start with and not have to go backwards in the chain to try to catch that up. So you want to be able to promote, say, hi, I have these excellent fiber solutions. They are already carbon neutral, so you can apply them however you want. If your plant is not carbon neutral, then you cannot make that claim. So there are segments here to this. And what you're talking about is the producer side of this. And I tried to share earlier, the piece I see is that there's a complete absence because of the history of hemp in our country of the technical merits of it in a cropping system. So nobody who is going to go out and bet the farm on these things is going to start accepting hemp in terms of its performance in carbon process until you as a community have these numbers worked out. There's two pathways: modeling, which is primarily, the primary model is called Comet Farms from USDA. And you should be able to go in there and just rough out very quickly what you think your carbon status is and where you're going with it. But for a company to accept those numbers, the certifiers, the verifiers are the ones you're going to have to find. And they're the ones who are going to come in and say, yes, this field did sequestrate 1.8 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalency over the last 3 years. And with that, then the registry is able to issue this certificate. Certificates are then attractive to buyers because they say, oh, this is coming from ABC company, and they have a perfect record, never had any sort of problems, versus another credit that is coming that's more wobbly, less certain, not well put together, and that would probably run at a discount. So none of this is uncertain. The price of carbon we don't even know for sure what that is. It might be $20, it might be 200. So there's a lot to be done for you hemp people. My curiosity is, anybody have any knowledge of this in terms of a cover crop character in a field? When you plow down, what do you get? Or when you terminate this, what sort of biomass is being incremented if it's 100% of the plant? Because if you're removing most of the biomass off the field into bales to go into process, then it could be actually a poor choice in a rotation that's trying to build carbon. So until these numbers and the actual issues around this are a bit more deeply discovered, you're at a disadvantage when you're competing with the other crops that are more well understood and have the legacy of 100 years worth of basic research behind it. Over.
Yeah. I appreciate your comments. So I was hoping that we could keep it high level. So what I meant was, in the sense that if the hemp is eligible for carbon credits, and if the processor can prove additionality by using hemp products, that is not considered double accounting. That's all I wanted to say on that. But of course, there's the direct emissions the company has, there's the amount of electricity consumed, and there's emissions that's also involved on that process, particularly the processing side of your carbon footprint, right? So that all of that has to happen there.
Yeah, I think your issue is in the termination of the eco-service credit is what you're missing, is that when you sequestrate something, it's sequestrated, right? It's not open to be transacted again. So there is the opportunity to buy and sell these things when they're still in sort of certificate mode. But once you go and you're an end user, you're buying this to offset. Once you offset, that carbon credit is terminated.
Absolutely.
Right? There is no future for that. It can't. In history, it was double counted because we didn't have this feature in the system called blockchain that could identify, in this case, the commodity with this weirdly unique tracking through the blockchain. There's a lot of issues here.
Absolutely.
Disadvantage because we don't have the basic knowledge about what's going on.
Well, we do have some data, out of Europe and Australia that is proving that hemp is just an incredibly environmentally friendly crop. In the end of the day, it will be project by project basis, right? But one thing I wanted to point out was that carbon credits are a commodity. That price will fluctuate, and people will speculate in the futures market and may flip in and out of ownership of that credit. But to your point today, there is one credit that can only be sold once at the end of the day. So it may go through a daisy chain of buyers and sellers, and there'll be winners and losers, but there's one credit for that 1 acre or the 1 ton sequestered.
Sure. Okay, we'll move on real quick, guys. We're getting short on time. It's already almost 3:00. We have about 10 more minutes left. So I want to buzz through a last few questions so we can respect Julie's time. And real quick to offer, I put in the chat, we are hosting on July 6th a discussion to dive more into the carbon, to talk about less about the exchange and more about how we earn them, best practices and so forth. And so feel free to join, and I'll let Bruce talk a little bit about that also. But Kelly, go ahead.
Well, I think you just kind of answered. I was going to make a comment, and then I had a quick question. I did want to just touch on the actual earning of carbon credits on farm, in case there was any farmers attending that were interested in actually that process. And this, Neil, this might address a little bit of what you're talking about too. I can't speak to, after the hemp is harvested and moved off to another, product stream, except for the fact that it has to be any credits mean that you're keeping carbon from returning back to the atmosphere. So anything that's harvested off the farm that gets turned into a product would ultimately get turned into some kind of durable good or something. But on the farm, to earn carbon credits, it is almost entirely based on your production practices. So for farmers who are looking to sell carbon credits, that is based on, what, not so much the crop you're growing, maybe the production style, so agronomic or horticultural, but what you're doing on the farm as far as, cover cropping. And so for farmers specifically, to earn carbon credits, they will get evaluated on what their production practices are. And that's how they're able to sell carbon credits back into the market. And my quick question was about the cost. I've seen a couple comments about these really exorbitant costs for getting into the market. Maybe I'm not understanding it correctly, but for instance, there's some of these broker companies like Indigo or Nori, and they're working directly with farmers to say, all right, you're doing these production practices that equals X amount of NRTs. And then we're going to pay you for those. But they're not charging, those companies are not charging anywhere near the cost that I've heard some other people mention on here. I'm hearing $5,000 or $6,000 to be evaluated to be audited on their farms per farm per 1,000 acres. So I'm just curious, could you clarify a little bit more about the cost to get, maybe I'm mixing up numbers, but to be audited, I don't think the cost is really that high compared to the potential return.
Who are these people you mentioned that are auditing for free?
No, I didn't say for free. But they're not charging. I heard someone say something about $250,000 or something. I mean, I don't know anyone's auditing for free, but the cost is reasonable for a farmer, $5,000 or $6,000 for an audit.
So, I mean, we've been talking with these environmental engineers, and none of them have said that. And these are the certified, again, the engineers must be acknowledged by registries. Otherwise, their opinion doesn't count, right? So there are registries that are globally acknowledged for carbon credits, and they have their list of approved auditors.
Yeah, verifiers are like title insurance, right? So you buy a house, you buy title insurance to make sure that there's no weird sort of histories in all the background of the house. Same thing holds for the carbon. The verifiers are conceptually the title insurance who say, yeah, this is legit. And they have some liability in case somebody comes back and says, hey, I bought these things. I went out and looked for them. And the farm isn't there, nor is the owner. Therefore, now you have recourse back to the verifier. $3,000 is sort of a fixed fee. I got a feeling that's going to be like maybe $1,200, $1,500 once the business gets moving.
So essentially, the verifier is absorbing some of the cost for the engineer over several projects.
Kelly, no, the verifier is paid by the producer to guarantee that they have good credits, right? That these things are indeed in the field. In theory, they're supposed to check the owner, the title, the actual implement, what happened in the field, did everything that they claim in terms of practice. And you're right about that. It's not so much crop is the carbon producer. It's more the tillage effect. So, Iowa State will tell you pretty much every day that anything that's disturbing the soil other than strip tillage or no-till is likely in a declining carbon condition.
And are you, Kelly, are you talking about entities that are saying, we'll come do this process for you at a discounted fee, but you have to sell your credits to us?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
That's Indigo.
There's several companies like it. I was just, so there's two separate things happening. I think I'm kind of getting it now.
So there are entities that will subsidize it for you. You have to sell your credits to them. They guarantee you a minimum price, but the vagueness there is if it's higher than this price, they'll share it, and they don't tell you exactly how they'll share it. So I think by the time your credits get to market, they're taking a gamble. They are gambling that they're buying it. They helped you get the credit, whoop-de-doody, but you didn't get the money out of it because they got it. So that look, I am not in a position to tell someone to do it one way or another, but it's just something to be careful about. If you think the credits are really going to quadruple, that's not a good deal for you.
Thanks.
Real quick, we've got two more questions, and I really want to get to both of these. Bruce, you, and then Christy, I'll holler at you next. But go ahead, Bruce.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Mandi. Hi, Julie. Got two-part question, and I apologize in case you covered this earlier because I arrived a little bit late. But first one is soil sequestration. Bottom line, it's the farmer that's going to get the credit for soil sequestration, correct? There's no doubt about that.
Yes.
And it's going to be somewhere less than 1 ton per acre. Is that a fairly correct number to your understanding? I'm trying to get a good handle on this.
No, we're hearing 5 to 6 tons per acre
in the soil.
And that's that's in the plant.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm talking first. Just the soil.
Okay. Do we have enough?
Because I see people talking using these big numbers, but they aren't differentiating what's sequestered into the soil versus what's sequestered into the stock that could be turned into durable goods.
Yeah, I think you're right about the 1 ton in the soil, but I wouldn't put my house up for collateral. I'd want to double check that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. That and I appreciate it. If you find out anything specifically on that, it kind of plays into the next meeting we're going to have on the 6th because we're trying to differentiate. How much is sequestered into the soil versus how much can be sequestered into durable goods. And what I have still talking to different people, but I'm finding that what's sequestered in the soil is somewhere between a half a ton and 0.67 of a ton.
Okay.
And I have some people that are telling me that it's just never going to be more than 1 ton for the soil sequestration.
Got it.
But either way,
yeah, these are metric tons per hectare. You got to be careful.
Per acre.
So, yeah, the range in row crops in Midwest, probably between 0.3 to 1.5 metric ton soil organic carbon. Right.
Yep.
And that soil organic carbon converts to carbon dioxide equivalency at a ratio of 1 SOC to 3.67 CO2e, right? So you have to make sure you're talking about nickels and dimes in these things, right? The conversion is the magic element that you have to be attentive to. The downstream stuff, after you take the stock off the field and all the biomass, that's a different issue. That's a downtrack thing. That belongs to the outfit that says, hey, look, I'm replacing cotton with hemp, and there are all sorts of great benefits for that if you can prove it. Or I'm, replacing, concrete with this charred stuff that, is a big savings on hard cement.
Right. And so there, what you've introduced there, Neil, and thank you, is the second question. From what I'm learning and from different sources, the secondary sequestration can be 10 times higher than the soil. And that's by taking the stalk and pretty much taking the bast and primarily the herd, measuring what that is per acre, and then calculating, as Neil mentioned, the CO2e equivalent. So if it's 3.24 tons of stalk, and that's just the usable stalk, right? Not the whole thing, not including flowers and seeds. But so if you got 3.24 tons per acre times the actual tonnage times 1.5, you come up to almost 5 tons of CO2 equivalent that's being sequestered
The
per
question
acre.
is,
And the manufacturer gets that, or does the farmer get it?
the question is the sequestration number, right? I think sequestration means the carbon's gone forever, and I don't think that's a claim hemp or wood can make, right? Because
but Neil, the herd has turned into something like hempcrete that's going to last for over 100 years. So
okay, well, in those cases, yes, but so you have potentially avoidance is the first number you should concentrate on.
No, it's sequestration. It's the hempcrete house is going to last over 100 years. So
right.
we're still focused on sequestration. Avoidance is a totally different thing. Yeah.
Right. But the avoidance of the concrete, right? The cement, which is a high energy problem with this filler, is there's avoidance and sequestration credits in this.
Yes, I agree.
They are not equal in terms of merit in the market.
Okay, so there are credits for avoidance as well?
Yes.
Well, thank you for
stopped using nitrogen in my farm.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, instead of using concrete, say you use hempcrete.
Right.
You get an avoidance credit for that?
Potentially. You got to have a process to prove it.
Yeah, like bioplastics, using hemp instead of fossil fuels. As I'd mentioned earlier, though, my concern is that because hemp is relatively new, that there's not going to be a specific methodology that matches 1-1 that's going to work best. And as we mentioned, there are hundreds and hundreds of methodologies. So we haven't had a chance to look through them all and find the ones that work for hempcrete and bioplastics for that additionality that Neil is talking about.
Because simply from a sequestration point, and I'm glad to hear that from both you, Neil, and Julie, that there's an opportunity for avoidance as well. but simply from a sequestration rate, that it can be 10 times more than the soil, and you can't do that with corn. So that's what I was wondering: is it the manufacturer that gets it or the farmer? Because if I were a farmer and my credits could be 10 times higher by growing hemp than for growing corn, I'm going to pay attention to that pretty quickly.
Yeah, Bruce, I think your projections got there in a roundabout way, or a different way, I should say. If I recall your how I saw at NOCO, you kind of captured that in your numbers, perhaps without knowing it. So, okay,
let's do this last question. Again, I welcome all of you to please come back. I did add the link to register for the event on the 6th, which is the link is reoccurring. Today's link is reoccurring as well. So please go ahead and register for that. But Christy, go ahead. I'd love to hear from you real quick.
Hi, friends. I'm driving, so I apologize that my attention isn't completely on my screen, but I just wanted to add a couple of points. Most of you on this call don't know who I am, but I'm an agronomist in Central Michigan. I work with producers all over the Midwest, both in the industrial hemp realm, as well as traditional row crop and specialty crops as well. Approximately a year ago, a soil sampling tool was developed, which was then built out to engage some of the soil documentation information that's being required by multiple different marketplace players. And so this tool was developed to with basically specific information in mind for a farmer who would like to start documenting their carbon sequestration, whether that be in soil or within different cover cropping systems or whatever. What we found was many of the companies like the Noris, like the Indigos, like Winfield United, like these huge companies that are looking for this information are basically all asking some of the similar questions. So we developed this tool to basically provide in the initiation, provide this documentation for the farmer. Of course, there's a cost to that in the professional context. It costs my professional time and it costs the software development company and the overhead of that company to produce that. But we're partnering directly with the farmers to help develop a tool that's oriented to capturing this information that we're talking about. So where I geek out and where I bring value, or where I'm hustling hard right now, is in doing the documentation that the farmers need. Outside of the realm of the verifiers, outside of the realm of the environmental engineers, what we're doing is we're getting basic soil information with people that understand farmers, that know how to interact directly with farmers, and have a concept and understanding, a functional understanding of what it's like to actually be on that farm and how these systems are so dynamic. So we've been able to produce more carbon data points with this tool in my network of consultants and with our little group than any organization outside of the U.S. Geological Services. And why that's significant is because we're actually starting to assign trends to practices. And I'm very excited to be able to, just even talk about this right now, because we've been flying under the radar as we're gathering this information. And I feel like it's answering a lot of the questions that the farmer has, because we in this room, it doesn't appear that there's very many farmers in this conversation. And we in this room have a different functional and different level of technical understanding of what this all looks like and how to make all of this work. And I appreciate all of you in this room, because it takes people in this conversation to really make this happen. But also people that walk in the shoes and wear work boots like I do are actually out there with the farmers, representing practices and correlating practices to things that make a difference. It's hard work, it's dirty work, but it's very important work. And so some of the interesting things that we're finding is, especially in the cover crop context where we have industrial hemp and a cover crop combined, we're seeing multipliers there at the very early level. And now we're using a series of testing to do that. And there obviously it's very costly for this testing to take place, but we are getting it done. So when a farmer that has 1 acre of hemp wants to go through the documentation for carbon sequestration, there really is no ROI there whatsoever. For the promise of maybe getting $15 a ton for the maybe 1 ton that they could potentially sequester if they leave the crop in, it doesn't really pay. But on large scale agricultural basis, as it pertains to industrial hemp. I believe that the fiber and grain hemp with the plant densities that we're planting, we have a very real chance of sequestering a tremendous more amount of carbon than, say, some of our other grass crops that are very effective at sequestering carbons that are planted at high densities like barleys and wheats and other small grains. So I think there's a lot of things to unpack there, and I'm excited about the July conversation, which sounds to me like we'll be getting into more of the nitty-gritties of that. But I wanted to let you all in this room know that there are real people doing this documentation, and we are engaging and have gotten the attention, even though we're coming from the private sector. We are getting the attention of the educational system, the universities that are like, oh, hey, we have, environmental engineers that need project work, et cetera. We got grants for this and that. So we're starting to get the attention of other groups. But up until just recently, it's all been talk of the carbon marketplace and no talk of how to document this correctly at the farm level. So that's what we're doing. And it's coming out of the private sector, and it's coming from a necessity to support the farmers and helping them make good decisions and guide them on how to do this, instead of going through a cropping system, having some type of audit at the end of the season and then say, oh, whoops, sorry, it's not going to work. You didn't do enough. You're out the documentation costs, you're out all of that, plus your crop. So we're trying to help guide and direct farmers to make great decisions with this, because farmers naturally want to be stewards of the land. It's the business that they're in. So anyway, that's all I'll say about that. Thank you for the time, Mandi. Appreciate it. You guys all have a great day.
Thank you. Julie, real quick, I'm going to hand it back over to you, and then we'll cut it off after this. But I want to say thank you, and I want to commend the diversity in the group. And that's the whole purpose of this, is we really need every piece of this to collaborate, and every piece of our supply chain to collaborate, from the farm to the exchange. And so I just want to say each piece of you are very critical, and I welcome, and that's why we host these with so many different subjects and topics, with the intent to drive this. So I want to speak to that also, and thank you very much for your input. But go ahead, Julie.
No, I was just going to say, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity, and as well as Christy for her input. Christy, if you're still on, I would absolutely love to collaborate going forward. And Mandi, I really appreciate your point. This is a big lift, and it takes all kinds of knowledge. Christy's knowledge, farmer knowledge, commodity knowledge, and exchange knowledge of where this market's going and what we need to do. And then, dare I say it, we need some lawyers. Yeah. And Bruce, hats off to you. You were the first one who walked me through your projections on carbon. And I had not seen them before. And anybody who comes out and speaks publicly first is pretty bold. So I appreciate you and the work you're doing too. So I just think it's a great forum. So thanks for the opportunity. And we'll be sharing as we go along as well.
Awesome. Well, let's keep this up, you guys. Again, I welcome each of you to continue to keep coming back. If any of you need anything or need help connecting to anybody specifically, I'd like to use this platform as a way to penetrate markets, meet new people, really educate ourselves and make connections. And so please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to help you however I can, connect you with our members. And of course, we're always looking for new great speakers like Julie herself to come up and present. So if you or anybody you know would like to participate in a panel, please reach out as well. Other than that, thank you very, very much for your time today. And we'll see you guys all next time. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Okay, guys, thank you very much for joining us again. I'm really excited about everything that we talked about and excited to continue making connections. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Follow us on our social media channels, Global Hemp Association and globalhempassociation.org. Subscribe, like, share, comment. We're excited to have you. Please come back, invite others. And again, thank you very much for joining.